On that note, I'll hand over to Kevin and he'll get the webinar started and introduce Mark and Michael.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everyone again to another Vantage Resilience series, webinar series where we discuss strategies and how to make businesses stronger, more resilient. Well, today's topic is about how do we sustain resilient leadership during stressful times. And one of those pillars that we see in strong businesses is a strong focus on leadership and culture. And so leadership focus is ever more present at the moment during COVID. So we're joined by Mark Butler today. So Mark's, as Megan said, is an international best-selling author, mental health strategist, clinical specialist in the area of anxiety, depression, trauma, substance abuse, and addiction. And in the workplace, the clients he works with will see these issues manifesting in mindset, performance, stress, and burnout problems. So in the 12 years of clinical research, physiotherapy, psychotherapy work, rather, he's worked with senior executives and business leaders from many industries and levels. So he's got commercial, 25 years commercial and senior leadership roles. And so he knows the stresses and pressures that business leaders face every day. So welcome, Mark. Thanks very much, Kevin. Hi, Michael. We're also joined by Michael Fingland, who needs no introduction, CEO of Vantage Performance, whose sole purpose is to make businesses stronger and more resilient. So we're going to start off with a poll, as tradition has it, just to get things going. So Megan will bring that up now. A couple of poll questions. So how would you rate the current level of stress in your organization? And that's low, medium, high, or very high. And then over the next 12 months, next question, do you think the level of stress in your organization will increase, stay constant, or decrease? So I'll just give you another 5 or 10 seconds to fill that out, and Michael or Megan will read out the results.
Yeah, so we've just got the votes coming in now. We've got about 60% of people have voted. So the votes are still coming in. We'll just give it another few seconds.
I'm keen to see what this poll tells us, actually.
Yeah, we've got majority of people voted now, almost 80%. So we'll close it off there. So everybody should see the results come up on their screen now. Yeah. So in terms of question 1, how would you rate the current level of stress? 70% of people that responded have said medium. So that is very much the highest answer there. And yeah, a very broad response on question 2. Over the next 12 months, do we think that the organisational stress in their organisation will increase, stay constant, or decrease? Increase and stay constant, 40-45% each there, and 15% of people think that the level of stress will decrease.
That's an interesting result, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I wonder if that poll was taken 3 months ago, I think it would have been a lot different because we've now seen a lot of stimulus pumped in, and that's really been felt by a lot of business over the last 3 or 4 months. And once all these artificial measures come off, run into Christmas in March, I'll be very surprised if it doesn't go north.
Yeah, when we see some of the supports like JobKeeper, etc., start to be phased back or out, I think that will likely have an effect for sure.
I might get Michael. You just opened the scene for this here, so and particularly the last kind of 6-7 months that everyone's been through with COVID. What do you think some of the reasons are for some distressed environments within businesses that business leaders are going through, and how is it impacting their leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to set the scene, I mean, this has been our most anticipated webinar that we've had all year. I think we've all seen, I mean, everyone's so tired of 2020, they just want to get to Christmas and New Year's and sort of put it behind us because we've been on such a roller coaster, which is why I'm a little bit surprised by that survey result. It's pleasing that the levels aren't as high as I suspected they were, because we've gone through, extreme amount of stress around your family and your personal safety when we didn't really know what was going to happen. And then once we kind of got through that for 6 weeks, then it turned into, okay, stress for the business for most leadership teams. And so that you know, I mean, we're only sort of 2/3 of the way through that. I think once all these stimulus measures come off, that's when we're really going to see a lot of leadership teams tested. But I think that's why this webinar has been so anticipated, because what we're going to talk about today is what can you do now? We've got 3-4 months at most before some real pressure comes on, and Mark's going to talk to some of those strategies as well. But you know, the two typical situations that we always find ourselves in with our clients is hyper growth or real fast growth. So they're growing well, the revenue's growing really, really quickly, but the foundations aren't that strong, which is what led to the development of our fast track program. So cash flow's tight, they're not making any money, but revenue's growing north. And how do they keep strengthening those foundations around culture, leadership, business intelligence tools, margins, all those sorts of things? So that's typically 1/3 of our clients, and the other 2/3 of those that are in financial distress, where they've been hit by a black swan event like this, or they've lost a major customer, or you know, and they go in a bit of a spiral. So you know, all of our clients are always in that high stress, and fast growth stress can be just as stressful as decline driven. Because at the end of the day, and Mark will talk to us no doubt, you know, the body doesn't separate between, you know, what you might class as good stress, being we're growing so fast, we're out of control, what that does and the havoc it plays on your body and then into your leadership capability is just the same, if not more powerful sometimes, than stress caused by a spiral down decline.
Yeah, that's right. So, and that lack of, I guess that's leading to like lack of focus, lack of motivation, high stress, can't sleep leaders. So if they're developing, if that's impacting them to that degree, then that's going to be impacting the organization.
Yeah, I think Megan showed it before, but we kind of came across this discovery a few years ago, and we use this in all of our collateral now. We sort of show what does current state look like, and then, you know, what's the diagram to get you through, and then what does future state look like. So this is what we're going to talk about today, but this is what we've adapted for the individual leader, the leadership team as individuals. But those words that describe our current state in a normal business context is exactly that. Can't sleep at night, you know, highly stressed, irritable, and then again, these are words that our clients have used over the last 10 years or so. And then future state is the opposite, and then it's quite powerful when you see the transformation of clients as they go through that. But as I said, we're going to focus more on what can individuals, whether they're a CEO or in the leadership team or a senior position in the business, what can they be doing to strengthen their leadership capabilities through this process? Because as leaders, we're tasked, whether you like it or not, you're tasked with showing the vision, showing confidence, giving the staff the tools, not to micromanage them, but give them the tools they need to be more resilient than ever, because no one's going through what we're currently going through. And then a lot of businesses dealing with this year, I'll just loosely describe it as that, are going to be thrust into a turnaround situation or a high growth situation. We've seen some of our clients this year have gone through, it's been the shortest turnaround they've gone through. They were in distress coming into COVID, and because they were in the right position, the right time, the right place, their revenue has actually gone up north quite quickly. Yeah. So we're going to see some industries boom next year and others that get into a turnaround. Yeah.
And you're right, Michael, when you say that, you know, a third and two-thirds can be facing, as you say, you know, high growth or can be like some fiscal pressure or financial pressures in the organization. Both of those speak to uncertainty in the future, which is also what COVID has given us. You know, as you say, it's a black swan situation, isn't it? It's something that we haven't seen before, and we're not really sure where it's going to go. And that level of uncertainty creates an anxiety in somebody. You know what I mean? It's stress. You're spot on. You're dead right.
That might be a good segue to we'll do another quick poll before we my next question to Mark. But the next poll here is: what do you think is the most prevalent mental health issue in the workplace today? So I'll give you about 5 or 10 seconds to answer that. But that's, I mean, at the start of this process, it's all about recognizing the issue to begin with in order for some solutions to be provided. So we've got depression, anxiety, drugs, and alcohol or burnout. So what do you think is the most prevalent in the workplace today?
And just while we've got those poll questions coming through, we just had a question from the audience as well. I think they might just be 10 steps ahead of us, as I think this what will be covered at the end of the webinar. But the question is, what are the best techniques to use to make the best management decisions with those current global distractions that you described?
Yeah, definitely get into that.
Yep. All right, where did we
Great.
go?
Well, we've got 80% of votes in now, so I think we can comfortably close that off. So I won't give away what the correct answer is. I'll leave that to the expert. But you can see the results there on the screen. So in the lead is anxiety with 50%, then followed by burnout, depression, and then drugs and alcohol. So do you guys want to talk to that?
Yeah, do you want me to say something?
Yeah, so is that, are we on the money there, or are they on the money?
Do you know, it's a complicated answer just given the absolutely most recent research. Anxiety traditionally has been, without doubt, the most prevalent mental health issue in the workplace. But just in very, very recent times, and we can understand why to a degree, but depression has overtaken anxiety as the #1 mental health issue. And look, that speaks to just what we've been through since March this year. I don't expect it to remain that way, but the interesting point is, if somebody is struggling with anxiety for a prolonged period of time, depression will often occur. You quite often get the two of those, two for the price of one sort of thing. And it's if you're living with your anxiety long enough, it's so draining that we can develop a depressive episode around it as well. So yes, technically correct. Anxiety would be the #1 issue in the workplace, but just right now, depression actually is. And the problem for business with that is time off to recover from a mental health illness, and particularly depression, is about 5 times longer than it is for any other mental health issue. So that's got a huge effect on absenteeism, or indeed presenteeism, if you've got people who have been struggling staying at home or not being back at the office, or everybody's starting to roll back now. But so there's now another anxiety around sort of traveling and being on public transport and exposure in lifts, etc. So there's a number of different anxieties that people can be facing. But so for now, depression, just briefly, and then we'll be back to anxiety, I think, again.
On that, Mark, I think if it's not the biggest issue, it's #2 that's going to face leadership teams next year is, everyone's still running on adrenaline.
Yeah.
And then we'll hit Christmas, we'll all take a breath, and that's when you're going to see a lot of perhaps PTSD caused by COVID come up. You're going to see a lot of people then get sick. You're going to see a lot of CEOs, as we know. When you, as a leader, you run so hard during, busy times, and then when you stop that you get sick, right? But that's when your immune system, actually get turned off when you're in when cortisol and adrenaline are pumping through your body all the time, because your body can't, as we all know, you can't discern between a stressful work environment and what used to happen when we're running around the fields of Africa, whatever. So
chasing.
That much. We've evolved a bit, but we wear ties and shirts, but that's about it. The second biggest or the biggest issue next year is going to be how we keep the workforce productive and healthy as well, but productive and engaged. And I'm just keen to get your thoughts on that, but also the presenteeism, absenteeism versus presenteeism, and how that's going to play out.
I'm not sure if we've had a frozen screen there or not. Mark, are you still with us? I don't think so. We might try and contact Mark again, but we'll just, I guess, go back to the I guess, the plan that we're recommending to leadership teams and what they should be looking at in order to deal with some of these issues around. So we talk about headspace, we talk about nutrition, we talk about movement. But I mean, have you, or what are you recommending to some of the, I guess, the senior leaders that you're dealing with, Michael, as far as dealing with them? I'm sure there's some really simple techniques.
Yeah, I mean, we, for a long time, many, many years now, that we've implemented a lot of these initiatives internally, like a lot of things we've done over the years, and some really simple techniques that we provide to, or suggest to CEOs and the leadership team, which is simple breathing techniques. Box breathing is the most powerful one. It's simple because there's a whole range of things you can do around mental health or mental strength, and that's yoga, meditation, breath work, ice baths, which I'm a big fan of. The Wim Hof method, I've been doing that for 2 or 3 years now. So breathing technique combined with daily jumping in an ice bath, literally at 6 to 8 degree temperatures. That's a good way to wake yourself up in the morning. But the box breathing one particularly, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do around nutrition and exercise. They're absolute must-haves. But we provide all these things to our staff. As you know, we've had a PT that comes to the office twice a week for so many years. We pay for a float tank. We have a standing membership with a salon that provides that offers the float tank scenario.
Sorry, folks. Rolling blackouts in my area. That's what caused that. I'm back. But Megan, can you make me host just for a few minutes while I can?
Yeah, no worries, Mark. You should be able to turn your video on now.
Yeah. There we go. Sorry about that.
If you could just flick that back to me, that would be brilliant.
Okay, I can do that.
Welcome back.
So
Thank you very much. Did you miss me?
We're ad-libbing. We're
well able fellas, I'm sure. Yeah.
We're just saying some of the tools that we recommend to clients, and because meditation is not for everybody. Yoga for everybody. But I'm a big fan of Wim Hof, as you know, Mark. But even the simple breath work like box breathing.
Yes.
And it's what the Navy SEALs actually developed before they go into battle. And when we suggest that to CEOs, because some CEOs are, meditation, that's not for me.
Yeah,
But the Navy SEALs do it.
Yeah.
And it's so simple. And we just share these YouTube clip and say, just try this and do it a few times. And it's even simple things like that have a profound impact.
Look, it absolutely does. And it's related to how the body reacts to stress, because we're in that fight or flight response, which is it's a survival instinct. So when we're under stress, we feel like we're under attack. If we're under attack, we go into fight or flight response. So we switch off the logic thinking part of the brain. And the only way to get that back, as you say, is to control your breathing, because that sends the signal to the autonomic nervous system. It sends the signal to it to say, look, this actually, we're not under stress or under attack here. And our survival instinct hasn't evolved all that much since time began. The things, we still have that sort of visceral fear of snakes and spiders and heights and the things that can kill us. But in actual fact, in modern living, we should be afraid of guns, electricity, and cars. You know what I mean? They're way more likely to kill us. But we haven't evolved to that extent that we would recognize those as threats to the organism or to the body. So we tend to still stick into that fight or flight mode, and it's basic and it's instinctive. And as you say, breathing is the way to stop it. And every military or police tactical response organization in the world practices that it's called combat breathing. That's what they do. And it's that box breathing in and out, and sends a signal to the body that we're not actually under attack. We can slow down.
I've done a lot of research into various different types of breathing techniques to lower stress, and I use there's some simple ones, in and then out for 15 seconds. There's a whole bunch of them, but at the end of the day, they're all about getting to a point where you're down to 4 breaths per minute or lower. And that's when your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. Sympathetic is when we're alert, active, like now, we're stressed or adrenaline's pumping. Parasympathetic is when the nervous system drops, and that's any of those breathing techniques at the end of the day, they're all doing the same thing, dropping your breath below 4 a minute.
Yep.
And regulate. So I use it. So, and I say this to all of our clients, I use it before a big client meeting. If we're going if I'm about to do some sort of, what would be normally be seen to be a stressful event, right? And it does. You can set your watch to it, so to speak, with your heart.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Drops it straight away. And and the key thing with our collective client base, typically by the time they've come to us, whether they're in high growth or decline, they've been in a really stressful environment for a year or two. So they're already coming to us presented like in that situation, and then throw COVID on top. So, we've been advocating this for years, but CEOs should be providing access or knowledge around a lot of these different tools. And the approach we've always taken is, you can do 7 or 8 different types of breath work. There's meditation, there's yoga, there's this provider PT. We have someone who comes in once a week and does those shoulder massages for you to sit down. There's a whole bunch of things like that, because one, it makes you more remarkable as a leader, because you'll be in a minority of businesses that provide that. It shows you care to your staff, which is what you need to demonstrate in spades at the moment. Demonstrate that you care for your staff. And at the end of the day, it's an investment as well. So you can take this as from a warm and fuzzy point of view, but you can also take it from a dollars and cents point of view. It will pay off if you invest in the mental health. And I actually don't like the word, but it's more mental strength. I prefer to use mental strength, because mental health still has a bit of a negative connotation to.
Yeah, or certainly mental illness does. Yeah.
Whereas really what we want is our workforce to be mentally strong, so they can deal with whatever gets thrown at them.
Yeah, resilient, essentially. Yeah.
So, Mark, you do a lot of kind of one-on-one kind of mentoring with leaders, business leaders. So during the initial phase, you're assessing where they're at and what the issues are that need to be dealt with. But what are the challenges? And then comes the implementation phase. So they got to start implementing some actions to deal with whatever the issues are. So how do you keep people on the straight and narrow? What are some of those challenges, and how do you overcome those challenges?
It's a similar process for an individual or for a team leader, sort of to work with their people. First of all, we need to educate people on in the body, first of all, to demystify it, and just what Michael's been speaking to there as well. This is visceral stuff that happens in the body. You can't just snap out of it. That just doesn't happen, right? So an education process that people understand what's going on, and then engaging them in the sort of the best practice for themselves, because people will vary, where their stress levels are at, or where their triggers and stressors are at, and their coping strategies as well. That varies quite a bit between people. I'm a clinical director for an organization up here in the Northern Rivers, and it's quite a bespoke one. So, you don't come and do our treatment program. We design what is needed for you. And I completely see the value in that. And it actually speaks to that model that you had up there, where you talk about headspace, nutrition, and movement. Reminds me very much of how a GP will look at somebody today. If 20 years ago, if you went to your GP and he said, or she said, you had high blood pressure, here's some tablets, off you go. That was it. But nowadays, what's adopted a lot more is what's called the biopsychosocial model. And if that sounds like a lazy cobbling of 3 different ideas together, you'd be right. That's really what it is. But what it speaks to is there are sort of biological or genetic reasons for people succumbing to any ailments or illnesses, including reactions to stress. There's a psychological component, and then there's that sort of environmental component. And if we talk about the GP, if you went now and they said, you've got high blood pressure, and the first thing they'll check, is there kind of family history of heart or cardiovascular issues in your family? They'll check, how's your anxiety levels? What's your worry levels like? What's your work situation like? So now you've looked at biological and psychological, and then they'll generally ask you, do you exercise? What's your diet like? So what's your environment and your social sort of risks, if you like. So, you know, and that would be any sort of GP's response to somebody who's coming in saying that they've got high blood pressure, or that they're not sleeping, or that they're, you know, they're under stress at work. They won't just give you a tablet and send you off. They tend to look at all of those areas. And in terms of somebody wanting to recover or wanting to become the best version of themselves they can be, there's really, that's a very long way to answer the question you just asked me, Kevin. But you empower people in the recovery process themselves. So you're not a patient, you're not a client. You're actually actively involved, and it comes down to you, the individual, as to how you progress. So you need to empower people in their recovery or resilience program. You need accountability to ensure people stick to what they're doing, and then they need to just be immersed in the program, or be immersed in whatever it is you need to do. And if it's an exercise program or a meditation or a breathing program, or they need to fix their diet, and all of the things that will reduce that cortisol response, that adrenaline, people living on nervous energy and coffee, and, you know, just to try and get through the tough times. That's your adrenal system. And when that's in overdrive, if you've got too much cortisol and adrenaline that isn't getting burned off, coursing through your body, that's where inflammation happens, and that's where cardiovascular issues happen. And, you know, animals in the wild have a great way of dissipating that. We don't. It just stays in us because we have the worry, the ability to say, what if, you know? And so we can ruminate and worry, and that keeps our cortisol and our adrenaline up, and plays merry hell with pretty much every system in the body, really.
Throws everything out.
Yeah.
There's very little known understanding or fact. When cortisol, the way it's meant to work, as Mark knows this very well, it's at its highest in the morning, and that's why you wake up, right? So cortisol's high, and then it tapers off, and then by about 8, 9 o'clock, it drops to sort of close to zero. That's why you feel sleepy.
Yeah.
A senior leadership team, no matter what environment they're in, high growth or distress, your cortisol level will start there, and it'll just stay high all the way through the day and night.
Yeah.
Because it never drops off. That's why and every CEO that we bring on as a client, they all say the same things. Can't sleep at night. I've got bees in the head. If I wake up at 2 a.m, that's it. I'm not getting back to sleep.
Yeah.
Because your cortisol, it's not following the same rhythm as it should do during the day.
Yeah.
So unless you're doing, and therefore, you know, this is where some really basic stuff, and this has just come from us immersing ourselves in trying to understand what our clients are going through, you know, 15, 20 years ago, and it's been an iterative process. But that's why we recommend they go and get their cortisol tested. You know, I've had it done regularly over the years, and you know, to see if you are in stage 2 or 3 adrenal fatigue.
Yeah.
Where your cortisol now just starts down low and still does the cycle, but it never gets to where it needs to be. So, you know, simple things like, and we've been told this since we were kids, you know, get enough sleep. Well, there's actually a lot of science around it, and once you understand it, I've protected really. It
makes perfect sense. If your energy is coming from your cortisol and your adrenal system rather than from your food, and you'll hear this as stressed out people all the time, oh, I skip meals, I forget to eat. Well, the energy's got to come from something, and if it isn't coming from your diet and your food, then it's coming from the wrong place.
It didn't sort of, the penny didn't drop for me until I understood the science behind sleep. Right? It's the least researched condition there is out there, and it's as simple as this. And I'll just take 20 seconds. So in our body, we've got lymph nodes, the lymphatic system. So all the cellular waste that our body creates gets flushed through that, and that's all well and good. But in the brain, we don't have any lymph nodes in our brain, so the cells store up all the waste, you know, of the day. And at night when you're asleep, that's when the cells actually contract, creates a space. The waste then goes into the cerebral fluid, gets flushed out through the blood-brain barrier into the body, through the lymph node system.
Yep.
So if you haven't had, and this is how I explain it to people, if you haven't had your 7 or 8 hours sleep, it's like a washing cycle. It hasn't finished. You've still got cellular waste kicking around in your head. So as a leader, you cannot function at the level you need to be. You're not going to come up with those breakthrough ideas that you need and your team needs to do, and you're just not going to act. You're going to run at 70% instead of 100%. So just simple things like that, and this is what we advocate all the time here as well, is simple things like have a pint of water as soon as you get up in the morning, because, and most people again don't understand the science, is when you're asleep at night, you actually breathe out about a pint of water on your breath.
Yeah.
Paper. So again, your brain just doesn't function well. So these are simple things that every leader should instill in their team, because you're not going to get the best out of your team, and they're not going to feel good either.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I've just got a question from the audience. To sort of round that out back to a leadership perspective, I guess it's probably obvious to those who have done a lot of research exactly how this ties into leadership, but maybe to those who haven't done enough research or any research, it's not so obvious. So the question is, how do you help leaders and the workforce make effective decisions whilst being surrounded by business issues, but also these personal issues? Like, how do you enforce that accountabilities are still being factored in, helping the business move forward, even with all this noise going on?
Well, for me, I mean, you make it a priority, and I'll throw to Mark, but for me, you make it a priority. As a leader, you say, this is really critical. You know, we care about you as individuals. You provide all these different tools, if you like. Before, we have standing memberships with a float tank centre, with a yoga centre. You know, if anyone wants to join me in the Wim Hof method, I'll happily pay their membership for that. If you and we just share videos. So we have a book club. We it's up to people to make up their own mind. But the approach we've always taken is, as our 3-pillar program: headspace, nutrition, and exercise. Don't care what you do in any of those 3 pillars, but you just have to do something. You choose what works for you. Try a few different things on for size, but give them one. You've got to show it's a priority for you as a leadership team.
Yeah.
You've got to make it easy for them. Like behavioral economics 101. If it's easy, people will do it. And if they know this is something that you expect of them to look after themselves, number one, they said, I don't care which method they do, but I do expect them to do something that's going to help with their headspace.
Yeah.
Eat well and exercise.
Yeah. You know, every organization has got a moral and ethical and legal responsibility to provide a safe workplace. But at the same time, the employees have also a responsibility to turn up at the best version of themselves they can be. Very often, if they're not, because of that fear of being judged or fear of being seen as less than or not a team player, stigma in you know, just to give it a word, if people feel stigmatized, they're much less likely to present or to ask for support or ask for help. So I think it's really important that leaders are able to spot those subtle signs in people when they're not quite performing at their best, or they're not being a team player, or they're isolating from each other and that sort of thing. And if you can spot it in another, you should be able to spot it in yourself as well. We're the only species on the planet that doesn't feed itself properly, and the only one that doesn't get enough sleep or get enough rest. It's incredible. We're supposed to be the smartest one, but we're the ones that are driving ourselves into the ground. So you're right. It has to start with the individual. All answers are within us, and it comes from there. If you're being the best version of yourself you can be, then you're in a much better position to lead people in that same sort of mind space. But if you're a stress head and everyone else sees you as a stress head, you're not going to get a result.
But the thing I'll add to that, though, is particularly with senior leadership teams, they're in so much stress they can't stop. They can't actually see their impact on their workforce, colleagues. So there needs to be, I call it intervention, but if you've got a staff member or a team that are showing all the typical signs and they fly off the handle because their stress is already here, and the simplest thing of a loud noise, sends them off, you've got a responsibility as a leadership team to actually intervene, so to speak, to say, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? The number one reason for high performance teams is psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just an emotional environment, but a physical environment. So our office is full of plants, and in fact, at times we've had so many it's like a jungle because good oxygen and stuff, and the team laughs about it. But it creates an environment that's physical subtle things, and even now that we're all in open plan offices, so it's hard for people to zone out. So buy everyone noise cancelling headsets. You've got to create in your office space or whatever workplace you've got. You've got to create hubs where they can zone out and take time out, where they can do that, and don't, you're not time watching when they're on lunch. You come with a philosophy of, I trust my people first, and then I expect them to live up to that, as opposed to, people have to earn your trust. You should always start with the position of, I trust my people. So, if they're off for an hour and a half or 2 hours because they're going to go and do a yoga session or something, I trust they'll still get their work done that they need to get done today or for the week. If you start with that position and give them the permission to look after themselves, that's critical. But sometimes you will need to intervene, for want of a better word. Some people they're not that self-aware that they need to start taking some structured time out of their day.
I guess that leads on to that's how you sustain resilient leadership during these times, is to gain the trust of your staff, be authentic with your staff, and be open and transparent with your staff. That's going to be.
And an interesting point there for leaders to remember as well is, of those in your organization who are struggling with a mental health or a mindset issue, about 1 in 4 of those this is their very first time experiencing this kind of an issue, is as a result of COVID. So you've got a whole new swathe of people that prior to this really didn't struggle, but they will from now on. And if it takes a GP, you need to be showing symptoms for up to 6 months, to be more days than not, in order to get a diagnosis of anxiety. So this is a slow burn. This is, and that interestingly speaks to the poll that we started with. There's only about 15% of people on here see those sorts of issues decreasing in the next sort of 12 months. They're right. If anything, it's going to go up unless we create it. And we just need to create the environment for people to feel safe to reach out and look for the sort of help that they need. As leaders, we're not expected to save them. We're not rescuing anyone. We're not solving anything. But there are fundamental issues that we need people to feel safe enough to put their hand up and say, look, I might need a bit of help here.
You're right. Your job as a leader is to provide those tools, or provide the permission to invest in themselves. And not expect everyone to have to do everything outside the office. Build hubs in the building where people can actually feel comfortable. Okay, I want to do an extra 40-minute meditation today and not feel like I'm going to be judged. That's fine, because it's going to pay off tenfold. And that's the approach I think everyone has to take. But your job as a leader over the next 6 to 12 months is going to be, everyone's going to be tested like they've never been tested before, because not only have you got financial pressures on the business, whether you're back to high growth because you're in that right spot, that's a factor of COVID, or you're going to come under some significant financial pressure. You're going to have that to deal with, and then you're going to have a workforce that will have delayed stress and delayed anxiety, and you're going to see an increase in sick leave. So if you're not preempting this with a lot of these techniques and tools and just giving people the permission to invest in themselves, it's going to impact on your business next year. Guaranteed. And one thing that I just always rings home for me is what is going on in the home of that staff member. Because they may not be performing well at work, but there's always a reason. And often, they might be dealing with some kids at home, and their friends are talking about suicide and stuff. Suicide in Victoria is up 30%. Self-harm is up 30%. Every organisation is going to have someone in their organisation, depending on your size, that's going to have someone who's going to be impacted by someone who's done something themselves as a result of COVID. So unless you're working with the leadership team to work out how can we be ahead of this, it's going to impact on your business, and it'll hit culture and morale, and that can be quite a slippery slope.
There's a straight line between people's mental health and productivity and profitability. It absolutely is. You're dead right.
So I think we might have gone a little bit over time, but I feel like we could talk on this issue all day. But thanks, Mark. That's been some great insights, and thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Michael.
Now, I should mention that, Mark, you've created an intensive 12-week mentoring program for business owners and leaders who been under the immense pressure of trying to to manage their business during this period. So feel free, if you want to reach out to us, we can pass on Mark's details and he can take you through that program later. Now we may have some questions, but probably not many because we've only really literally got a couple of minutes left. But if there's any burning questions, Megan, I'm not sure if there is.
We do have some questions, but before we get on, hey?
Yeah, and we're happy to keep going if we've got a few questions to get through.
Sure, well, I think before we get on to questions, we have what I'm sure is the most anticipated part of the webinar, is the Lucky Door Prize. So you guys might have forgotten about it, but I'm sure the audience didn't. Mark, did you want to tell us quickly about your book?
Sure. Yeah, look, this concept or project, if you like, started out. There's 18 authors on here, and everybody's a thought leader or a luminary in their sort of respective field. And we pulled together, each one contributed some expertise in their area. Mine is more around how can we give leaders and people leaders in an organization the tools to be able to talk about mental health with their people in an effective way. So like Kevin alluded to, I do some work with individuals one-on-one in a mentoring situation, but also with organizations to train leaders in how to be able to have the sorts of conversations that create that psychologically safe environment. There's a number of other people in there. They're talking about, basically, it's an enterprise guide, if you like, for businesses that are navigating their way out of COVID and into or new normal. I don't know what's the language people are using these days about a post-COVID sort of environment. So that's essentially what the book is.
Great.
Available on Amazon, etc. So.
And I think it reached international bestseller lists recently as well. So I'm sure whoever gets a copy of the book will enjoy reading it. Yeah,
it's #1 in the US, Canada, Australia, #10 in the UK, I think it was. And in those sort of in that business environment. So it's been, and it was all done for charity. So we never expected it to take off as well as it did. But Food Bank in Melbourne is the one that's profited from that. So I'm delighted to see that. So
excellent. So we have a very high-tech random prize draw system that Michael and Kevin are going to do now.
It's like the Eurovision Song Contest.
So the person does have to be online. So I've got a list of who's online here. So hopefully we don't have to have a redraw, but shall we go?
I was going to say too that Food Bank's a good charity, the Turnaround Management Association. That's their charity of choice as well. So that's a good synergy.
Kevin, would you like to read it out?
Yes, and our good friend of the firm, Simon Soggett, is the winner of
excellent.
Fantastic. Well, we'll talk later on, but we'll get a copy over to Simon for sure. We'll be very, very happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll just get your best postal address offline, Simon. Congratulations.
Well done. Thank you.
So we will now just close out with some questions. So we've got a question for Mark specifically. Mark, what are your thoughts on companies with remote workforces and how to be an effective leader in that scenario?
Yeah, okay. The same sort of priorities apply. We need to be able to be in regular contact with our people to ensure that they're tracking as well as we'd like or as well as they'd like to be. Like the less obvious signs that you're going to see are things like responses to texts and emails, where if somebody traditionally was a "Hey guys" or "Hope you're having a good day," that kind of conversation disappears. You'll see something in the language where they're just responding with facts or with information. That's usually a bit of a sign for me. Missing deadlines where they've usually been sort of a bit more efficient on getting reports in, that sort of thing. Those are the more obvious signs with remote workforces. But what we're also seeing is people, like we went from just before COVID, I think it was 7% of workers nationally had the ability to work from home at least one day a week. We went from that almost overnight to 90% of the workforce we're doing in the corporate space, we're working from home. And what we found was, given, and you spoke to this earlier on, Michael, as well, trusting your people. Given that opportunity, we saw, you know, our workers embracing the autonomy and being capable of delivering what and knowing what they need to deliver, etc. But if you see that starting to slip in somebody, that's pretty much a sign that you need to start gentle inquiry with them to see how they're traveling.
Just to add to that too, I think communication, you've got to up your level of communication as a leader. So
absolutely,
a monthly newsletter, it's got to be a weekly or fortnightly. And when you do your, you know, we're big advocates of daily, weekly huddles. Make them a video call, so people have to turn their camera on. You just got to up your leader. You've got to check in. You got to, if they're out on site, call them regularly. Get your team to call you guys more regularly. You just got to check in more.
And there are ways of phrasing a question as well. I talk with leaders a lot about that, how you can make a gentle sort of an inquiry with somebody without it looking like a finger wag or a, you know, this isn't a performance conversation, and this, you know, we're not saying that you're dropping the ball. I'm just curious as to how you're traveling.
How you doing? Anything I can do to help.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's the same thing if you're faced with a suicide situation. There are two main questions that you need to ask, and I speak about those at length as well. But you know, that conversation terrifies people, and leaders in a lot of organizations don't want to have the conversation. About 50% of leaders are uncomfortable having that conversation with their people about how they're tracking, so they tend to pass it off to HR. And it's actually you as a line manager, as a people leader, it's your responsibility. It actually starts with you. And the other thing that people hear is if you say, oh, look, go speak to HR about it, what they're hearing is, I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's absolutely the wrong message to give. So, you know, with a little bit of upskilling, it doesn't have to be that scary to have those conversations. And that permeates all through your life.
Really good point, Mark, because the last 15 years, HR's become the, if you're a line manager or a divisional manager, it's your job to deal with antisocial behaviour, performance issues. You know, HR is there to play a compliance role, help set the strategy, but not to deal with the solution. And that's even, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's so important in the current climate. You've got to deal with this stuff in the field. Yeah,
and what's actually happening for HR at the moment, in conversations I'm having, is everything's coming on them. First of all, around people's, you know, there's growing issues around people's mindset, mental health, resilience, etc. But also how we're going to navigate the new way of working, and they're writing policy on the fly and changing procedures and strategies. So the whole lot, it's like an hourglass, and it's all coming into HR. And the problem is HR people then, like many senior managers, will hold themselves to a different standard than they would hold other people in the organization. And they're the ones who are not actually reaching out and saying, I'm swamped, I need some support and I need some help here. And if that hourglass gets choked, well then so.
Oh. Yeah, I think, just sorry not to lay on that point too much, but I think another one too is to understand as a leader, you don't have to have all the answers.
Oh, you certainly don't. In fact, you won't.
Yeah, and you won't. And no one's expecting you to, but a lot of CEOs, particularly in the SME mid-market space, assume and then to have it. So the pressure just builds and builds and builds.
Well, yeah, I'm a leader, and therefore, you know, I'm expected to have the answer. But in actual fact, if you say to somebody, okay, here's what you do if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling anxious, anything you suggest, they've probably already tried. And they're out of ideas, and they're coming to you saying, I need some support and I need some help. So the question is, well, what can we do to support you? You know, you don't have to save them. You don't have to rescue them. That's not your job. Your job is to create the space where they can feel psychologically safe to just put their hand up. That's it. That's as far as it goes. And then you could kind of work from there, whatever you need, you know. I thought there was another question there about not all companies have the ability to provide yoga sessions. No, absolutely right. That's true. But every organization has the ability to be able to create some space. I mean, I work with not-for-profit organizations that run on the smell of an oily rag. In fact, I worked at one time where we started the day, look, again, it was in the mental health, it was in the drug and alcohol space, but we used to start the day with a 10-minute meditation. I'm not saying that's working for everybody, but the effect it had of just sitting for 10 minutes with the team, eyes closed, breathing slowly, so that everybody started the day with the same energy level. It was incredible the difference that makes for the rest of the day. as opposed to someone coming in late, firing the bag on the desk and running off to their first meeting. You know what I mean? Which it's free. You can go for a lunchtime walk. That's free. You know, there's a number of things we can do. Breathing, God, you know,
free and easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Woo-woo. You know, some people, meditation is just not for them.
Yeah, but that's right.
You want to breathe like the Navy SEALs do?
Yeah, combat breathing.
Yeah, it says no. That's pretty cool. If I could be, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend of mine who was given the role with the police to teach them how to be mindful and reduce their anxiety. And he knew if he went in saying, I'm going to teach you how to be mindful, he would have been run out of the place. And also, because it was the federal police tactical response team, as soon as he said, I'm here from head office, they would have ran him out the door as well. So he just said, I'm here to give you the skills so that when everyone else around you is flying into a tizzy and into a panic, you can center and ground and control yourself so that you're in control of you and the situation, and you can do it very, very easily, and nobody even knows that you're doing it. And they thought, wow, that's amazing. What is it? And he said, it's called tactical composure. How do we do it? Breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4. And every other police force in the world is doing this. Now, okay, great, magic, thanks. You know, and yeah, so you can do that. That's
simple. Like you said, like he said, so we encourage Advantage, just do a walking meeting.
Yeah.
Just rather than go and catch up in a dank meeting room with no natural light, go for a walk.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if somebody's really highly anxious and it's almost like a crisis situation, or they're having a panic attack, you know, there are strategies you can do. There's a great one called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it takes about 30 seconds to bring somebody from that heightened state back down into a settled. So name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can taste, 2 things you can smell, you know, and just kind of in any sort of order you like, really. It's just roll them off the tongue. And that just brings that person into the sort of here and now. And their breathing actually starts to regulate themselves when they start looking around their environment. And it takes them out of that and down into this sort of slow, regulated space. So there's any number of different strategies like that I talk about with people all the time.
That's great, guys. Thanks very much. That's all the questions that we have for today. So yeah, thanks everybody for signing on. Thanks for your questions. Thanks very much to Mark and Michael and Kevin. And I'll just hand over to Kev really quickly just to talk about the final webinar we have coming up for the year.
Yeah, we've got I think this is in mid-December, we've got the advisory board going to be talking about the distinction between governance and advisory boards, and particularly ahead of the next 12 to 18 months, people will need to obviously bolster or get the right skill sets on their advisory board. So that'll be a pretty interesting and topical discussion we'll have to close off the year next December. And then we've got some really interesting speakers coming up to continue coming up in early next year as well. So thank you everyone for attending today. We appreciate you being here. If you've got any further questions, just contact us directly at Vantage. We'll send an email out with Mark's details if you want to get in contact with him directly.
Sure.
And thanks for joining us again today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, folks. Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Kevin, and Megan, and everyone for joining in. Well done.
Thanks, guys. Bye.